Welcome to the 8th lecture of this lecture series introducing international arbitration practice. In the first chapter, we have been discussing about arbitration agreements. As a prelude to drafting arbitration agreements, we have been dealing with various topics such as essentials of arbitration agreements, pathological arbitration clauses, the requirement of writing in arbitration clauses, and so on. This lecture and the next few would deal with practical aspects of arbitration agreements, especially its drafting. Drafting arbitration clauses is easy as well as difficult. The difficult part you saw in the pathological clauses. The difficult part lies in avoiding these type of clauses. Now, you have been given a tabula rasa, a clean slate. How do you start from scratch? You start from the main components. What are the main components? This is answered by the what, who, how, where questions. Remember the acronym WWHW and your arbitration clause is done. Bam. So what does this WWHW refer to? What? What kind of disputes should be referred to arbitration as per the arbitration clause? Who? Who should be the person arbitrating or administering the arbitration or appointing the arbitral tribunal? How? How should the arbitration be conducted? Procedural aspects such as the applicable rules or statute, etc. Where? The seat or place of the arbitration. But remember, whatever acronym one may use, it would be immaterial if the arbitration clause does not express an unequivocal intent to arbitrate. This is the baseline, and you must remember. So, these are the central components of any arbitration clause, be it an ad hoc arbitration, institutional arbitration, or whatever. Now, let us test out this theory, WWH theory, using various arbitration clauses. Now, let's take as a first example the UNCITRAL arbitration rules. Now, this what component is answered by any dispute, controversy, or claim arising out of or relating to this contract or the breach, termination, invalidity thereof shall be settled by arbitration. So, you note that the what component has two subcomponents. One is what kind of disputes would be referred to arbitration, and secondly, the unequivocal intent to arbitrate is conveyed. This unequivocal intent is conveyed through the phrase shall be settled by arbitration. And the remaining portion of the what component deals with what are the different kinds of disputes that are to be referred to arbitration. So it says any dispute, controversy, claim which arises out of that contract or which relates to that contract or the breach or termination or invalidity of that contract should be settled by arbitration. The who question is answered by the component which provides for the appointing authority. It says the appointing authority shall be so and so. How? How should the dispute be resolved? The procedural aspects. This is contained in the phrase in accordance with the UNCITRAL arbitration rules. And where the place or seat of arbitration is answered by the component, the place of arbitration shall be so and so. Now, this arbitration clause of UNCITRAL also has certain extra components. I'll read out the extra components. The number of arbitrators shall be so and so. The language to be used in the arbitral proceeding shall be so and so. Note that we are calling these extra, and there is a reason behind this, which we will deal with at the end of this lecture. Again, now let us test out this WWH theory in another context, that is the SIAC arbitration rules. So, what question is answered by again two subcomponents unequivocal intent to arbitrate, which is contained in the phrase shall be referred to and finally resolved by arbitration. The remaining portion of the what component deals with what are the kinds of disputes to be referred to arbitration, and this roughly corresponds to the UNCITRAL model clause. It says any dispute arising out of or in connection with this contract, including any question regarding its existence, validity, or termination, shall be referred and finally resolved by arbitration. The who component is administered by Singapore International Arbitration Center. How component reads in accordance with the arbitration rules of the Singapore International Arbitration Center SIAC rules for the time being in force, which rules are deemed to be incorporated by reference in this clause, where the seat of arbitration shall be Singapore. The extra components like the UNCITRAL model clause talks about the number of arbitrators and the language of the arbitration. Again, you would notice that a substantial portion of the arbitration clause is contained covered by the WWHW question. So, our WWHW theory works. Why don't you try this with other model clauses of arbitral rules or arbitration institutions and let us know if this works. You can always post your findings in the comments to this video. Now, coming to the extras, both the UNCITRAL arbitration rules and SIAC clauses contain two extras. One was the number of arbitrators and the other was the language of the arbitration. These are important aspects of an arbitration clause, but even if you don't have them, the respective arbitration rules would take care of them. Take the case of UNCITRAL arbitration rules 2010. In case parties do not choose the number of arbitrators, Article 7.1 of the rules says that the default number of arbitrators shall be 3. Article 7.1 reads, if the parties have not previously agreed on the number of arbitrators and if within 30 days after the receipt by the respondent of the notice of arbitration, the parties have not agreed that there shall be only one arbitrator, 3 arbitrators shall be appointed. But UNCITRAL arbitration rules does not have a default language in case parties have not chosen any in their arbitration clause. But if they have chosen the language of the contract, such choice will obviously apply to the arbitration clause as well, since the arbitration clause forms a part of the main contract. See Article 19 in regard to the choice of language. Coming to SIAC Rules 2016, Article 9.1 says a sole arbitrator shall be appointed in any arbitration under these rules unless the parties have otherwise agreed, or it appears to the registrar, giving due regard to any proposals by the parties, that the complexity, the quantum involved, or the relevant circumstances of the dispute warrants appointment of 3 arbitrators. So, even here, if the parties have not agreed on the default number of arbitrators, the number would generally be 1. Article 22 of the SIAC rules deals with language. Like the UNCITRAL arbitration rules, SIAC rules do not provide for any default language. So, what about the position in India? In India, the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 also provides for one arbitrator as the default number of arbitrators in the absence of any choice by the parties. Section 10(2) says, failing a determination referred to in subsection 1, the arbitral tribunal shall consist of a sole arbitrator. Subsection 1 gives the discretion to the parties to agree on the number of arbitrators. Again, like those rules that we saw some time back, 1996 Act does not provide for a default language. So this entire discussion reiterates our WWHW theory. Even if you don't have any extras such as choice of language or the number of arbitrators, the arbitration rules or the arbitral tribunal will take care of this. So your clause would not be invalid if you don't have this. In other words, arbitration clause will continue to operate even if you don't explicitly choose the number of arbitrators to the language. But that is not the case with the other components that we discussed under WWHW. So WWHW is essential, and please remember that. That's all in this lecture. More in the next one. Take care, bye bye, and stay safe.